session entitled Bridging the Gap, Enhancing Communication Between ECEs and Families to Support Children's Social and Emotional Development. So first, I'd just like to begin by acknowledging that the ECEs, the Early Childhood Collaborative Research Center at Mount Saint Vincent University, is in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. So my name is Jessie Lee McIsaac. I am an assistant professor and Tier 2 Canada Research Chair in Early Childhood Diversity and Transitions at Mount Saint Vincent University. I direct the Early Childhood Collaborative Research Center, who is bringing you this seminar this evening. So at ECCRC, we use a population-level approach in our research. We also focus on leveraging family voice and knowledge mobilization, trying to bridge the gap between research, policy, and practice. So in our work, we engage families in research, we work with policymakers and community to try to generate relevant and meaningful research in a way that we can work together to enhance early childhood well-being. As I mentioned, a big focus of our work is on knowledge mobilization, so bringing together research, policy, and practice, which is where this seminar came about. So we are leading a seminar series which focuses on sharing knowledge, so sharing some of the work we're doing at ECCRC, and facilitating collaborations among those working in early childhood. So we are thrilled to welcome you all here today. This is our first session of several, so please, if there are things that come up, like I think someone mentioned muting attendees, we can certainly try. It might actually be my background noise. I apologize. I have my 8-month-old with me. But we'll certainly do our best to respond to anything emerging in the chat. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Sarah Morris, who's going to lead us through some housekeeping items for everyone to keep in mind as we get going with the session. So again, welcome. Thank you so much for being here, and we're looking forward to the conversation.
Welcome, everyone. So glad to see that we had such great attendance for this event. We're really looking forward to doing this presentation for you all this evening and hopefully having some interaction a little bit later on in the evening. As most of you are probably aware from all the notifications you're getting, there is a chat function on here. So if you need anything in terms of technology support, or if you have any questions, please just use that chat function to communicate with us. But to backtrack a little bit here, with the mute and unmute function, if you haven't already found where the microphone is on your screen, just move your mouse around the bottom or the top of your screen and you should see a little microphone. And if you can, we would greatly appreciate if you could try and keep yourself muted throughout the duration of the presentation. Unfortunately, I can do a mute all, but I think it will end up muting our presenters, which we don't necessarily want to do. It's up to you. If you would like to keep your camera on, you certainly can. The cameras will just show up on the bottom of the screen. We'll be seeing the presentation at the forefront, so you're welcome to turn your camera off. Again, going back to the chat, please feel free to, if you have any questions, just to put them in there. We don't have a lot of time during this presentation allocated to answering questions, but our plan is at the very end, we'll try and address some of the questions that have come up, and anything that we don't get to, our two presenters, Stephanie and Marla, will be happy to address after the fact. If you need anything at all, particularly at the end of the presentation, you can use the raise your hand function. So again, that's on the top of your screen. You'll see a little smiling emoji with its hand up. To adjust your audio, camera, and mic settings, you can go to device settings. And lastly, I just want to say that if you are a social media user, please feel free to use the hashtag mobilizing connections and tag us at ECCRC_MSVU. Thank you very much again for being here, and we look forward to working with you the rest of the night. Great, so welcome everybody. My name is Stephanie and I'll be one of the presenters today for our webinar. So we're going to start off with a short introduction to myself and Marla, and then we'll get into the bulk of the presentation. So like I said, my name is Stephanie and I am the project coordinator for the pyramid model evaluation at ECCRC. So I've been with ECCRC since it first was developed back in 2018 and have taken on various different roles within this center. I'm also a part-time faculty at MSVU within the Child and Youth Department. So I completed my bachelor's and master's in Child and Youth Study at the Mount, and I hold a level 3 ECE classification. So I've worked in the field for 6 years now, gaining experience through multiple different settings. I've done some practicums in childcare centers, in early learning opportunity classrooms, which are now considered pre-primary rooms. I've also done some in private schools and accessibility services at the Mount. So I've also worked in childcare before transitioning into the research role here at ECCRC. So my master's research revolved around promoting sleep hygiene in preschool age children at home and in childcare, and my overarching research interest lies within the promotion of social and emotional development in young children and supporting those children who have emotional or behavioral challenges. So now I'll pass it over to Marla so she can introduce herself before we get started.
Thanks, Stephanie. Hey, everybody. My name is Marla Smith. I am a research coordinator at the Early Childhood Collaborative Research Center for the Positive Solutions for Families project, which we'll get into in a little bit here, but just some info about me and my background. So I'm originally from PEI, where I did my undergrad in psychology at the University of Prince Edward Island, and also worked as a youth educator and early childhood educator support worker for a few years at a non-for-profit organization called Chances. So I worked with a mix of ages, mostly kindergarten to grade 6 was my main age, but also infant to age 5 as well at the childcare. I also worked a bit with intensive behavioral intervention with children on the autism spectrum. After that, I moved to Halifax and did my master's in child and youth study with Stephanie, and did my thesis, which focused on adverse childhood experiences and how to better support early childhood educators in supporting children with early childhood trauma. So similar to Stephanie, my interest really focuses on the social and emotional health of children and how we can collaborate with those who work with children on a daily basis to really support that development. So I'm really excited to be doing this webinar this evening, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Great, so we're just going to go over an agenda of what we're going to accomplish tonight. So we're going to talk about the pyramid model in Nova Scotia, and then we're going to talk about positive solutions for families in Nova Scotia. Then the bulk of the presentation will be around bridging that communication gap between ECEs and families to support children's social and emotional development. Then we're going to do some breakout group discussions and then bring it back to the whole group to have another larger group discussion. This is the time where we'll answer some questions if we have time, and then we'll wrap up and kind of do some little housekeeping things at the end about certificates and recordings and things like that. So we're going to get started with an overview of what the pyramid model is. So the pyramid model was developed in the US through a systematic review of the literature, which included screening and looking through relevant articles related to supporting children's social and emotional development. So from the results of this review, a framework was created that encompasses evidence-based developmentally appropriate practices, which is known as the pyramid model. So this framework doesn't include any new practices or any never before seen practices. It really just organizes those practices into a convenient package. So they've been proven to be effective, so it's nothing new. So in total, this framework provides evidence-based research to support children's social and emotional development. So to ensure the successful implementation of the pyramid model practices, there's a coaching approach to professional development that is taken. So it's a little bit different than regular professional development. It means that in addition to educators receiving the pyramid model training, they also work one-on-one with a pyramid model coach. So this coach works with educators through action planning and goal setting processes, where educators set goals, they implement the strategies, they observe, review, and then repeat them. So this coach is kind of like a consultant, but they focus specifically on the social and emotional development. So the pyramid model also utilizes a data-driven decision-making process to inform implementation. So this really means that at every point of contact between the coach and the educator, the coach and the program, or observers and educators, there's information collected. So it can be as simple as just a tally of how many times an educator greets a child when they enter the classroom, or it could be a formal observation of practices. So this information is then used to inform the goal setting process, some professional development efforts, the evaluation, and a lot more. So the pyramid model is a three-tiered framework targeted at supporting children's social and emotional development. So the tiers of the pyramid model are supported at the foundation by that effective workforce. So the foundation for all the practices in the pyramid model are the systems and policies necessary to ensure a workforce able to adopt and sustain these evidence-based practices. So this can include support for staffing issues or behavioral guidance policies, just as an example. So the universal tier, which is the tealish color of this pyramid, it includes the nurturing and responsive relationships and then the high quality supportive environments. So this tier really includes practices needed to promote and support all children's social emotional development and has a large focus on that environmental piece. So the second tier is the secondary prevention. So this is the green tier of the pyramid. So this tier includes targeted social and emotional supports for children who are at risk of presenting challenging behaviors in hopes of preventing them before they occur. So with this universal tier implemented correctly of the nurturing and responsive relationships and high quality supportive environments, only some children will need this targeted social and emotional supports. So the third tier is the tertiary intervention. This tier houses the intensive interventions that are individualized to a specific child. So this is the very tip of the pyramid in that orange little bit. Again, so if the universal and that secondary tier are implemented correctly, there's only a small number of children that will need these intense individualized interventions. So if you do have a large amount of children who are currently receiving targeted social emotional supports or those high intensity individualized interventions, I would encourage you to look and explore the universal tier of the pyramid model to ensure that you have all those environmental pieces in place first before you move up the pyramid. So why are we doing the pyramid model in Nova Scotia? So we decided to implement the pyramid model in Nova Scotia based on the 2016 consultation report, which was written that identified 3 key areas that needed improvement and attention in early childhood in Nova Scotia. So the first was being a greater emphasis on supporting infants and toddlers' social and emotional learning. The second was addressing programming for children with diverse and special needs. And the last being addressing inconsistencies in quality of programming across the province. So from that, Nova Scotia decided to focus on that universal tier of the responsive relationships and the high quality supportive environments and decided to focus on that to support all children. So the pyramid model in Nova Scotia is funded by the Nova Scotia Department of Education and Early Childhood Development. We began implementing it in fall 2018 and we expanded our implementation both in fall 2019 and in fall 2020. So currently we are in select regulated childcare centers and select pre-primary programs. So we do have 2 cohorts that we focus on, one being the regulated childcare. We have 20 regulated childcare centers that are participating right now. Each center has between 1 and 5 educators that are being coached. And then we also have 43 pre-primary schools across the province. So within each school, there's about 1 to 2 educators being coached. So there's lots of people involved in the implementation of the pyramid model across Nova Scotia, one being the provincial leadership team who oversees all of the implementation across the province. So on the PLT, there's membership from the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development, the Nova Scotia Early Childhood Development Intervention Services, us at the evaluation team. There's different community organization representatives. So we have a family resource rep. There's also some social emotional expert, and then there's also some representation from P to 12 in this public school system as well. We also have 20 master cadre across the province, and they're really the holders of all the knowledge and support coaches and programs across the province in their regions. So these are mostly consultants with the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development, both in regulated childcare and in pre-primary. And then we also have a lot of the regional directors with NSCCDIS as well, so the Nova Scotia Early Childhood Development Intervention Services. We also have a coach team lead who is sort of the coach for the coaches. She helps support them and reflect on their practice and is the coach for them. So with the coaches, we do have 18 coaches across the province right now. They are employed by and housed at early childhood education support sites. So there's select NSCC campuses, the Nova Scotia College of Early Childhood Education, Jane Norman College, and CAPNY, which is the French support site. So the regulated childcare coaches are located by county, whereas the pre-primary coaches are located by the Regional Centers for Education or the CSAP, the French School Board. So we do have 5 regulated childcare coaches, 10 pre-primary coaches, and then 3 coaches who serve both regulated childcare and pre-primary. And I did see in the participant list that we do actually have some pyramid model coaches here with us today. So I'm glad to see you guys. And then we also have our regulated childcare centers and the pre-primary programs that we work with. And then of course, us here at ECCRC, the evaluation team. So there's lots of different data collection methods that we use with pyramid model and that the pyramid model has created themselves. So the first is the benchmarks of quality. So there's 3 different versions that we use. There's one for the provincial leadership team, one for the program and regional leadership team. So these are the pre-primary leadership teams or the regulated childcare center leadership teams. And then there's one for the coaches as well. So this focuses on the key areas of implementation to inform action planning. Then we also have the Teaching Pyramid Infant Toddler Observation Scale, also known as the Tippy Toes, and it's for educators working with children 0 to 3 years of age. And it focuses really on that environmental piece of the pyramid. Then we have the Teaching Pyramid Observation Tool, also known as the TPOD. It's used for educators working with children 2 to 5 years of age and focuses on that environmental piece, but also specific practices. And then we have coaching logs. So again, there's a couple different versions. We have administrative ones, and then we have individual coaching logs. So they focus on strategies that are used and time spent with educators and programs. So within the evaluation, we also conduct interviews and focus groups, surveys, and questionnaires with various stakeholders to get their take on implementation as well. So the evaluation of the pyramid model is funded by the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development, but conducted by us here at ECCRC. So we use a developmental evaluation approach, which is collecting and using the data to inform decision making as we go rather than all at the end and just submitting one final report. So the evaluation explores how the pyramid model is being implemented, what's working well, what needs improvement, are there any changes in behaviors or practices? So we use all the data listed that I had just mentioned to investigate how the pyramid model is being implemented in Nova Scotia. So now I'm going to hand it over to Marla, and she's going to talk about positive solutions for families.
Awesome. So positive solutions for families, similarly to the pyramid model, was actually originally developed in the United States by the Center on Social and Emotional Foundations for Early Learning. And what positive solutions for families is, it's actually a series of workshops delivered to families that aim to promote positive and effective parenting behaviors that promote children's social and emotional development. So as Stephanie was just talking about with the pyramid, it really focuses on early childhood educators and the awareness around social emotional health. And then positive solutions adds to that by educating families on the importance of social and emotional health. So implementing both pyramid model and positive solutions really works to provide that consistent messaging to do very important people in a child's life, both educators and families. So Positive Solutions is a funded project as well. So we receive funding from the Public Health Agency of Canada within the Mental Health Innovation Fund. We've also partnered with NSECDIS, so Nova Scotia Early Childhood Development Intervention Services, who provide province-wide specialized services to families of young children who either have a biological risk or a diagnosis of a developmental delay. And they are really implementing the workshop series, and we at the center are doing the research portion. So developmental interventionists, the DIs who work at NSECDIS, are acting as our facilitators for implementing the workshop series. As you can see here, just a little snapshot, the original workshop series had 7 different sessions, each with a different topic. And these sessions include activities, they include group discussions, evidence-based practice, role play, and they cover topics such as building relationships, strategies to promote positive behavior, the importance of routines, understanding cause for behavior, teaching children about their emotions, and play as a powerful parenting practice. So these sessions really get into how to promote your child's social and emotional development. As I said, this wasn't developed by us, so it was developed in the United States. So there have been a few changes since to the content, just around context and wording after our pilot phase, which I will get into next. But this is just to give you an idea of some of the topics that are discussed in the series. So our initial plan for the project was to implement the program as it was originally intended and created, and then further adapt the program based on feedback from parents. So as I mentioned, NSECDIS is implementing the workshops, and we at the center are really responsible for seeing how it went. So chatting with families and facilitators to learn their experiences and ask for any feedback. So in 2020, the funnest year of all, we did our first pilot phase and implemented the Positive Solutions workshops in 3 different regulated childcare centers in Nova Scotia. So we recruited about 16 parents. We had a maximum of 8 per center, and the facilitators delivered the sessions in person at the childcare centers in the evening at the time. We had childcare provided, had a family meal, really creating a space where parents could learn and connect with the material. Now, obviously, due to COVID-19, our project took a bit of a turn, and due to restrictions, we had to put the project on hold for a little bit before eventually moving the sessions online. So, we lost a few families because of that, everything going on in the world, differing priorities. But we were able to move the sessions online using Microsoft Teams, and we were still able to reach some families for our pilot phase. So after the sessions were complete, I did interviews with both the facilitators and the parents who were still able to join to learn about their experiences with the workshop, what they liked, what they didn't like, and how could this workshop series be improved if continued to be implemented outside of the pilot phase. So just a quick little quote on the bottom there. I won't read it all, but just to give you an idea of what some of the parents thought about the program. This parent specifically said that she really enjoyed that the series was around positive approaches and enjoyed that she had the opportunity to understand her child's emotions. So as I mentioned, we plan to implement and evaluate the program as is, and then from family feedback, adapt as needed. So we're actually currently in phase 2 of our project, which means we're going to be implementing the adapted program in 5 new regulated childcare centers. So like before, we'll do the data collection, interviews, surveys to learn about the experiences of families and facilitators in these new centers. So always incorporating that family feedback. So as I mentioned, this is a funded project, so we're really in the beginning stages of implementing and adapting this program to make it better and to also make it match more of the Canadian Nova Scotia context, as this was something developed in the States. So how our funding works is we're funded until March 2022. So once we complete the implementation and research portion in these new 5 childcare centers, we have the opportunity to apply for further funding to hopefully make this program more accessible to a broader group of families rather than just a select few. And along with implementing and evaluating the program, we've started translating the workshop material in order to reach other populations and communities. So right now we're working on translating the material into Arabic and French with a community liaison guiding us in terms of content being culturally appropriate as well. We're also starting to create a website where everything Positive Solutions can be held and found. So with COVID-19, we've learned how fast things can change and how being in person may not always be accessible. So how can we still support families and offer this information, when they might need it the most? So we're really in the process of creating that website that will house facilitated workshops at a specific time in the evening, as well as pre-recorded self-directed workshops if families can't attend that specific facilitated session.
Great, so that was just a little background on kind of what we're doing at ECCRC with the pyramid model and positive solutions, and trying to bridge that gap of communication and that consistent messaging between families and childcare centers and pre-primary programs. So the next part of this presentation is going to focus on the communicating with families to support children's social and emotional development. So these resources presented in the next few slides are largely been developed by the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovation, with an exception of one slide, which came from UNICEF, which has the logo on that slide. So everything else is linked on the slides. You'll be able to find those resources as well if you indicate that you want the slides on your evaluation of this webinar. So when that gets sent out, they're all hyperlinked, so you don't have to go searching for them. So now we're going to just move into how, what, and why we communicate with families and how that can support children's social and emotional development. So the goal of this section really is to determine ways you can communicate with families right now, what you should be talking or asking about, and what resources, strategies you can use in both childcare and at home to create that consistent messaging. So as we go, again, feel free to ask questions in the chat, and we'll try to address them at the end if we have time. If not, Marla and I will definitely follow up. So first and foremost, you need to take care of yourself when working with children and families. So if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't adequately support children and their families. So this also goes for families. So in order to support their child, they need to take care of themselves as well. So it's that balancing act. So we highly recommend and encourage you share this resource with families as well, so that they can continue this consistent messaging and be those role models for children at home. So first, you want to make sure that you notice your feelings. So it is completely normal and expected for you to experience a range of emotions right now during these stressful and unpredictable times. So it is important to notice your feelings and emotions so that you can identify ways in which you can calm yourself. So children are aware of adults' emotions. They pick up on our cues. You only have to say something once and they've got it down pat. So being able to recognize your emotions not only helps you problem solve solutions to calm yourself down, but it also models those behaviors to children, that it's okay to have these big emotions and it's okay, and this is what we can do to help deal with them. So once you're able to recognize and name the emotion you're feeling, you're better able to determine activities that will help with your stress and anxiety. So really trying to calm yourself by cooking, reading, going for a walk, or anything that helps you feel calm. You also want to make sure that you're limiting your media exposure. So right now there are countless news stories and reports of COVID-19 each day that are put out into the world. So it is really important to check up on the latest news releases and restrictions in your area, but also make it a habit of not going down that rabbit hole and just spending hours and hours reading those media reports. So that constant exposure to information can cause feelings of anxiety, which to an extent it can be avoided if we don't spend those hours reading those reports. So make an effort to turn off your phone notifications or read articles that only present the facts rather than speculations. So it's also really important to find someone you can talk to about your feelings. So being able to connect with somebody. So it could be a trusted family member, a friend, or even a therapist, depending on who you feel comfortable chatting with. So be aware of what you say in front of your children, as this can increase their fear and anxiety as well. So this goes into the next point of just being mindful. So children follow our cues and are sensitive to our responses, which might cause them to worry. So again, they pick up something after you say it once or twice and never forget it. So be aware of your feelings and how you talk about them in front of children. Avoid reacting to news or information you hear in front of children, and even just limiting your media reports on your phone or TV or on the radio in children's presence. So it's also really important to set reasonable expectations. So it's likely that things look different than normal right now with 2020 and what 2021 is kind of turning into be. Families may be working from home still, or not all children may be attending childcare as per normal. So focus on what you do have control over and keep those routines the same as possible. So this would be like your meals or your rest time in childcare. Those are pretty standard. You can keep those pretty similar across the board. So things that may be different, it is important to communicate these changes with children and establish these new reasonable expectations for behavior. So it might have once been that pre-COVID, everybody lined up, everybody went to the bathroom at the same time, everybody washed their hands at the same time. But now you might be working in smaller groups of 6 or 8 children that kind of stay together in their little bubbles. So you need to communicate these changes and kind of express what the new expectations are. So if everyone's not lining up together, maybe it's one group's going to the washroom to wash their hands to get ready for lunch, while the other group is expected to read a book or engage in an activity while they wait.
So when we talk about connecting with families with COVID-19, having conversations in person may be a little difficult, especially if certain childcares, they have expectations on who can enter the building, which is tough because, we're all trying to do our part and keep each other safe, but it's difficult when you need to have those serious. They're just simple conversations with parents. So there are other ways to communicate with families if you can't in person. Examples can include those on the slide here, like having a phone call or texting with a parent on a work phone. Virtual meetings can also be an option, so using Zoom or any free app that can be used to meet virtually. Also, WhatsApp is an app you can get on your phone to have virtual conversations as well. Email, newsletters, or even putting little notes in your child's backpacks, which could get a little tricky to find sometimes, I know. But there are, just a few other, those are a few options. And, the majority of you are educators, so you probably do a lot of these different communication options already, and you already probably know what works and what doesn't work for you. I mean, you guys are the experts here, and you probably have some more ideas that aren't listed. So if you're doing another form of communication not listed here, feel free to pop that in the chat box so people can get an idea of other ways to communicate. But these here on the slide are just a reminder that if in person doesn't work, there are other options.
So now we're just going to jump into one way that you could structure your conversation with families. So you want to begin with an opening, so asking how families are, how their children are, and what might be new in their worlds. So some families may mention challenges that they've encountered this week, so it's important to validate those feelings in order for them to feel like they're being heard and that you truly genuinely care about their well-being and their child's well-being. So this could look like saying, sounds like it's been an exhausting week for you. I'm validating that they're having a hard time, even though you might not think that that's something hard, they certainly did. So you might also want to invite families to share a low and high point of their week. Again, this shows that you are genuinely interested in how they and their family are doing. So the next thing you want to do is a check-in with the child and family progress since you last chatted. So if there are any successes or celebrations, celebrate those. So if a family member does not mention one directly, I challenge you to try and find something that is positive to celebrate or acknowledge with them. So you want to check in and see if there are any new concerns that the family member wants to chat about before moving on as well. So next you want to make a plan. So collaborate and share information and strategies back and forth with families. So it's powerful for families and educators to work together to provide that consistent messaging and for the children so that they aren't getting confused. So ask the families about how they are implementing something or if they have any strategies that work really well at home. So from there, identify a plan together and how you can go about addressing these concerns. So if a family does mention any new concerns, you'll then want to kind of problem solve around that. So again, collaborate with the families, provide suggestions, and troubleshoot with them. Again, just finally wrap up your conversation with a review. So summarize the next steps in the plan, offer to share your notes, or confirm a time for the next conversation. So reviewing these with families is a great way to check up to make sure everyone's on the same page and just making sure everyone understands what was discussed.
So some tips for these conversations can be as follows. So anticipate the needs of families. What does that mean? We can have some resources available to share if needed. So these resources can include websites, handheld resources about managing challenging behaviors, if that's what they're interested in, resources around supporting children through COVID-19, or a phone number for other agencies that may be able to support that parent, such as a community resource center, for example, or any other. You can also map out what you want to share, using this as a guide before you make that call or have that conversation with parents. Even just writing down some notes on particular needs or ideas, just so you have that confidence and are more prepared for the conversation, because having those discussions with parents and families can be tough because we all have different personalities, we all have different experiences, but just being as prepared as you can be really helps with that confidence. Also, Stephanie just briefly mentioned this, but help families identify their strengths and provide some positive feedback. Even if the conversation is around a challenging behavior and it's frustrating, make sure to give them a positive affirmation so they don't feel like it's all on them or they feel like they're a bad parent in any way. It's also really important to know that you don't have to be an expert or, solve all the world's problems. It's okay to say, I don't know. You can phrase it like, that's a good question. Let me see if I can find that out for you. Follow up with them when you might know the answer or you have a resource to share. You can also use active listening phrases for these conversations. So you can use language like, so you feel discouraged, or what I'm hearing is you're feeling overwhelmed with A, B, and C. Just so they know you're listening and picking up and acknowledging what they have to say is super important. Along with that, asking open-ended questions as well. So while talking about different strategies, you can say, how might you do that at home? Or what is most important to you right now in relation to your child? Finally, similar to children, always validate families' emotions and thoughts. It's important that they feel heard. Both educators and parents, as I mentioned, are super important people in a child's life. So having those conversations in a productive way will only help that child.
So it's also really important to find the right tone. So make sure that you're listening to caregivers and ask questions to get a better understanding of their behavior, the child's behavior, and any concerns that they may have. So just like Marla said, caregivers and families and educators are two of the most important people in children's lives. So their point of view is just as important as an educator's point of view and vice versa. So be warm and positive. So whether you're communicating via email or text or in person, make sure you're just welcoming and positive and offer that encouragement. And then it's also really important to communicate often. So just make sure you're communicating regularly, identifying with caregivers any feasible approaches to communication and to keep informed. It's also really important to foster that sense of trust. So the basis of an effective relationship and communication with caregivers is trust. So it's essential for caregivers to trust their children's educators. When speaking to caregivers, make sure that you are assured that that communication and that conversation is confidential, and the main aim of it is the child's best interests. Again, one size does not fit all. So when it comes to caregiver-teacher communication, find out what communication tool works best for the caregiver and use that. So it may look different from family to family. You might need to use a combination of the tool and approaches just to make sure that every family is reached. So be mindful of the fact that families do have different backgrounds and different beliefs. It's also important to make the caregivers feel valuable. So make them feel valuable by engaging them in the children's education and acknowledging that they do have a huge benefit to being involved and they're a great asset as well.
So what information should you ask for from families? Some topics you can discuss with families during these conversations or even just at drop-off and pickup times is, kind of the classic, have there been any changes to your child's environment at home, such as moving, a change in schedule, maybe a family member is now working from home. These can all impact a child's behavior, even slightly, so they're really important to ask. You can also ask about their child and, how they're feeling about COVID-19. What are those emotions they are experiencing at home? Did they find it difficult being away from their friends when center is closed? Are they really worried about getting COVID-19? Are they feeling more anxious or nervous than usual? You can also ask what strategies work best when their child is experiencing challenging behavior at home. So families may also have strategies that they do at home and know what works, such as going for a walk, giving them space to calm down, talking about emotions or feelings, or using visual supports. So if families already kind of had strategies that work and you feel that they're developmentally appropriate to bring into the childcare center and space, I feel like that's a great idea. Finally, you can discuss how you can support that child at home and ask if they need resources, for meal times, morning routines, nap time, handling frustration or strong feelings. Just always trying to be on the same page. What do you need help with, and how can we work together to make some changes? Also, make sure to ask communication preferences, so especially right now with COVID-19. And you can discuss the options I discussed earlier, whether they prefer texting, messaging. Just make sure you're comfortable with the communication style and the family is as well. So as we've been discussing, the pyramid model and positive solutions for families work to really supply that consistent messaging to both parents and educators. Consistent messaging is important, and using similar resources to support social emotional development will help you, parents, children, all stay on the same page. So using similar strategies and techniques at home and in childcare can help limit those challenging behaviors and offer a feeling of comfort and consistency for children, especially during COVID-19. So some of you may be familiar with Tucker the Turtle already, but although it may be a popular technique in early learning and education settings, it can also be used at home, and using it in both settings can actually provide that child with a consistent way to manage strong emotions and know they have that option in both environments. It also really helps to practice the technique and for them to get used to it. So on the next slide here, it explains the 4 steps, but Tucker the Turtle takes time to tuck and think, which is a bit of a mouthful, a prize to anyone who could say it 5 times fast, but Tucker the Turtle takes time to tuck and think. It's a scripted story to help children manage their emotions. So there's a storybook you can find online, which we've linked later on. There's also a song you can sing, which I'm not going to sing to you right now, but it's there. But Tucker the Turtle teaches children the turtle technique, which is number 1, to recognize a feeling. So to recognize if they're feeling angry or sad, to number 2, stop their body, and number 3, tuck inside their shell and take 3 deep breaths, or however many breaths they need, before number 4, coming out of their shell when they have a calm body and can think of a decision. So this is why it's really important to teach those emotion words and to tell parents the importance of teaching emotions so children can recognize what they are feeling. So, just saying, I see you're sad today. It's okay to feel sad. Is there anything I can do to make you be happy today? Labeling those feeling words can help children recognize when they are feeling a certain way and can use the turtle technique when they need some time to breathe and calm down before acting out.
So another scripted story that has 2 versions, one for childcare or an early learning environment and one for home, is We Can Be Problem Solvers. So this scripted story illustrates the steps to take when your child encounters a problem. So it has a wide range of problems and solution cards that can be substituted in depending on the situation. So it encourages children to work through the process of solving their own problems while giving them the tools necessary to solve them themselves. So the 4 problem solving steps is the first one, what is the problem? So children identifying what problem is it that they're having. Is it that somebody took their toy? Is it that they want to play with somebody else's toy? That maybe there's not enough toys or anything along those lines, something that is a problem in their eyes. Step 2 is to think of a solution. So with this scripted story, there comes a bunch of solution cards where a child can go and look through the solutions and pick which one they want to try. So once they've picked a solution, they move on to step 3, which is critically thinking about that solution. So what would happen if they try this solution? Is it going to be safe to use, or how would it make everybody feel? So if they're satisfied and happy with the solution that they've chosen, and they think it's going to turn out okay, then they go to step 4 of giving that solution a try. the solution may not work. And then you'll go back to step 2 and you think of another solution and you problem solve and you critically think about it with them. So with this scripted story, it gives children the tools and a guide of how to problem solve and how they can do it themselves.
Sorry, I was muted. So moving on to routines. So routines, educators know a lot about routines already, I'm sure, and the importance of them. For consistent messaging, share this knowledge with families. So some really good tips for routines are shown on the slide here. Structure activities, so there's a clear beginning, middle, and end. Establish a routine and follow it consistently. Minimize the number of transitions that children have during the day, a really good one. Minimize the length of time children spend waiting with nothing to do, and also use visual schedules and timers. Visual schedules don't just have to be used in childcare settings. It's actually really good to use similar visuals and strategies at home to provide that consistency to children. Using visual schedules and timers kind of let children know what to expect, and this is beneficial for all children, especially those who may have some difficulty transitioning or stopping activities. It's always a plus to have a warning to when an activity is going to end or change rather than just ending it abruptly. So using visuals and timers in both settings can be super beneficial. So for example, for a childcare example, we can say things like, we're going to clean up in 5 minutes for snack. Let's set the timer so we know when to put our activities away and to clean up. Additionally, a home example could be, we need to wash our hands really well when we come home. Let's look at the pictures to show us all the steps to get clean hands. And an example of those visuals can be shown on the right there on this slide. There's also one above that, a getting ready for school example as a visual schedule, always teaching children what to expect, which will help with routines and transitions.
So it's also really important to establish expectations. So expectations provide children a concrete direction on what they are and aren't supposed to be doing. So just like the routines, it provides predictability of how things are going to unfold. So you want to make sure that your expectations are positively stated. So saying we are safe versus no running. You want to include a visual, so best if it's real life pictures of children, better yet if it's the children in your class, so they can personally identify with it. And then you also want to make sure that they're limited in number, so not having too many, but not having too little as well. So you may have these overarching expectations like the ones on this slide. So the we are safe, we are kind, and we are responsible. But how these expectations are carried out in different routines or activities may look different. So for example, inside you may have children use walking feet, but outdoors they are encouraged to be aware of their body and to move around and run around. So it's really not enough just to put up the expectations and expect children to use them or really even see them. So you need to point them out. We need to teach these expectations. We need to review them during large or small group activities and remind the children of the expectations before switching activities or locations, especially if they are different from one activity to another. So it's even better when you determine these expectations and what they look like in each routine with the children themselves. So it gives the children the sense of control and ownership over these expectations. And then once children are aware of the expectations and what they look like in each routine, it's really important to provide this positive descriptive feedback when they are doing and using them appropriately. So positive descriptive feedback is more than just saying good job. It's saying, Abby, I really liked how you were kind to your friends today by sharing the sticker book you brought in. So it's that labeling of what they did to meet that expectation that makes it 10 times more effective than just saying good job. They don't know what they did a good job at if you just say good job. So children know what they did right and are more likely to do it again because they were acknowledged for it. So an example of this, going back to the we are safe. So in childcare, that could look like we use walking feet in the hallway, or at home it could be I tell mommy or daddy where I'm going. And the last thing that we're just going to talk about today is just recognizing and validating emotions of children. So you want to make sure that you are teaching a range of positive and negative emotions so that it's teaching children it's okay to have these big emotions. It's okay to feel them, and it's okay if you're mad or sad. So teaching them what confused looks like, what silly looks like, what surprised or scared or nervous looks like. That range of positive and negative, because we all know some days are just not good days. Even adults have bad days and you feel those negative emotions. So it's okay to have those. It's just the way that you deal with them. So you also want to make sure you're using a variety of strategies to teach and recognize emotions, because just like adults, children don't always learn and are receptive to one way. It's best if you use a variety of strategies. So this could be books or puppets or scripted stories like Marla and I had already mentioned, or games, or anything of those sorts. So it's also really important to label and discuss these emotions with the children. So you want to validate those feelings. You want to verbally name those emotions that they are displaying and recognize that that's how they're feeling and it's okay. And then give them the tools to deal with those emotions. So teach the strategies for children to use to deal with their emotions and for other children's emotions as well. So as I mentioned before with the scripted story, the pyramid model has a tool called the solution kit, where they have a bunch of different solutions where children can go to and pick which solution that they want to try. So do they want to share? Do they want to wait? Do they want to use a timer? Maybe they want to choose a different activity. So giving them the tools to use and to problem solve on their own. Marla also mentioned the Tucker-Turtle technique, and even ones that we all know about, blowing the bubbles and smelling the flowers, those breathing techniques. So examples of these in childcare could be, I see that when Beth took your toy, that made you really angry. What could we do about it? Or even at home, you could say, I can see you are upset because Daddy was in a meeting and couldn't play with you. So why don't we create a when Daddy is busy, I can poster, making activities and giving children the resources to choose what activity they can do on their own while their caregiver is busy. And then once the caregiver is not busy, they're able to interact with them again. So giving them those tools. So we're just going to end off with this slide of some additional resources that we link. So the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovation has a huge resource library that has tons and tons of resources related to social and emotional development for families, for educators, for childcare centers. Just a lot there, and it'll take you a lot to get through it, but I promise it's worth it. They also have their COVID-19 resources, which is a lot of what we shared today, which are specifically around dealing with pandemics and scripted stories of the importance of wearing masks and washing your hands and how to keep everybody safe. And so we've also linked the CEPHL parent training module. So these are the positive solutions for family modules that are all available online for free, that can be shared with families, but just do keep in mind that it is the US version that is up there. It's not our adapted version that we have changed for the Canadian or Nova Scotian context. So there might be some word choices in there that we don't necessarily use here. There's also the Pyramid Model Consortium, which provides a lot of resources and the Pyramid Model training. It's pretty inexpensive. You can purchase it as a childcare center and everybody can use the same login. You could do it all together, or you could just share it and do it on your own time. So there is infant toddler modules, there's a preschool modules, and there's also the birth to 5 modules. And then there's a couple of other ones about trauma-informed care, implicit bias, and being culturally responsive, and then also a wellness one of taking care of yourself. And then we just linked the Tucker-Turtle at Home Read Aloud if you do want to share that with either the children or the families that you are working with. So that is it for us. This is our contact information. If you do have any specific questions about Pyramid Model or positive solutions for families, feel free to reach out. If there's anything general, feel free to put it in the chat right now, and we'll try to get to it at the end if we do have time. So thank you everybody so much for coming. I'm going to hand it back over to Sarah right now, and she's going to go over the next part of the webinar. I really enjoyed having everybody here, and I'm so glad that we were able to actually discuss this, and technology has been working pretty good, so that's a bonus.